Well, welcome everybody. Here we are doing another podcast, videocast, where we are exploring different ways that people in the new church, specifically in the general church, are experimenting with outreach and different technologies as the church is changing. Today we have Pastor GöranAppelgren from Stockholm. And he's been a pastor in that church now for 31 years. And we're going to bring him in for conversation about some of the incredible things that they've been doing ever since COVID and even before COVID started. So let's welcome Göran. Well, hello. Yeah, we can start off with this slide here. Welcome, Göran.
Thank you.
I'm really glad you could join us. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your work especially starting off with in Stockholm in the church, and then we can expand it to some of the online experiments that we've been doing.
Yes, so what you see on that picture is our church. It looks like a normal building, and it is, but the first 2 floors, that's where the church hall is. And then there are apartments above it. When you come closer, you will see that it's just not a normal building. It's something that tells you it's a church. And you see a close-up with the entrance and an inscription in Latin, which I might get back to. So that's in the middle of Stockholm. We're very lucky to have both to have a building, but also the location right in the middle of Stockholm. We have church services every Sunday. We also have classes or discussions and things like that, Bible classes and classes where we read some of Swedenborg's texts. Often a book series, reading the whole book. Right now we're doing a series in this big work of Swedenborg's called Arcana Celestia, or Heavenly Secrets. It's a series on what he calls the grand man. So those are a few things we're doing.
I'm wondering if you could just talk for a few minutes about COVID, what happened with COVID in Stockholm. I know that Stockholm and Sweden handled the whole pandemic differently than in the US. And what did that trigger for you with changes about pastoral work?
Yeah, I mean, it came as a shock for all of us. And in the beginning, we thought it was going to be over in a couple of months. But that did not happen. So, like in every other place around the world, more or less, we had to close down activities in the church building for at least 6 months, 8 months. And then it was a bit on and off whether we could have services in the church or not. Mm-hmm. But what we realized was that before everything had been in the church, so having reading Swedenborg's books or the Bible, we were in the church, and suddenly we couldn't do anything. And since we were in the modern era with online capacities, we realized we had to do something where we could reach people through an online system. And we chose the Zoom system. Mm-hmm. And we did that with what I called classes, discussions. When it comes to church services, Sunday services, we hadn't started streaming, so we couldn't do that. What we did instead of that was to send out a written sermon at 11 o'clock every Sunday to those people who had signed up to receiving that. But the classes we had online, and maybe a bit to our surprise, because we had people sign up to our information bulletin. We have an email list service sending out that, telling people what's going on. And of course, you can be anywhere in the world and receive that. So from having had everything in the church, we now had people sign in from all over Sweden, actually from Norway also. And there was one Swedish person living in Paris who also signed up.
Wow.
So that was a very exciting time. So yeah, that's what we did.
So I guess the technology, which my experience was, technology improved tremendously in that time, and that led to some of this ability for you. Is that how you experienced it?
Yeah, technology improved. I mean, before, using Zoom had mostly been having like, you and me talking and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it really didn't matter if the quality wasn't that good. So yeah, it did pick up, and we've been very happy with what we've been doing. It's functioned very well.
So one of the simple observations that I have is the background that is right behind you right now did not exist before COVID. That was one of the things that showed up. And do you want to say a little bit about that and what led to the background, and what does that reflect?
Yeah. So this is actually going back to before COVID. Yeah, that's nice. Then you see the whole name of Swedenborg.
Maybe you can bend out of the way just for a moment so everybody can see everything. Yeah, that's right.
There we go.
Yep. And that, of course, is in Swedish.
Yes. And the words above the name Swedenborg, the word means curious about, or inquisitive, you could call it. So we started, this is before COVID, we started a series of lectures, and we call the series Inquisitive About Swedenborg, or something like that. We wanted to attract people who had heard about Swedenborg, had some interest, and would hang on to what we were doing. So we started that series, a few years before COVID. And then all of that was in the church. I mean, this is before COVID. And again, with COVID, we couldn't do that anymore. So gradually we started to think in terms of podcasts. So what we do now, well, during COVID, we couldn't do anything, but it took us from that in-house thing to think about doing podcasts. And that's grown quite a lot. And when you see the stage behind me, we do what we call live podcasts. It means that we have an audience at the same time as we make a podcast recording. So me or somebody else is sitting there with the guest doing the podcast. We have the audience, and after the podcast is done, we have a discussion with the audience. And it's worked out in a very nice way.
Sorry to interrupt, but what I hear you describing, and I know it's true because I've been there, is you are in the church hall right now, and if the audience was looking the other direction away from you, they would see a whole bunch of chairs that are kind of circled around, or maybe
Yeah.
it's set up as tables right now. But that's the environment that you invite the live people to, which is downtown Stockholm.
Right. So yeah. So this is the church hall or the society hall. It's not the sanctuary, and there's a point in that. So they come in a different way at the side of the building into this room, which means that well, let's start here. Swedes, as many Western people, are a bit shy about church. So, but we know that there are lots of people out there who really want to find a church. And by having these programs, it's easier for people to say, oh, I'm going to a lecture. And once they're here, we invite them to go up, because the church itself is upstairs in relation to this room here. We invite them to go upstairs and have a look at the church. And every time there are people doing that. And they love it because it's a very beautiful sanctuary. They can also buy books, and of course they can stay and chat and ask questions about what we do. And there are definitely people who have become regular visitors to our church services, who have been here listening to what we've done down here.
So I think to contextualize where the church is, of course, Swedenborg is a historical figure in Stockholm, but how does that play into what you do as a congregation and a community?
We talked a lot about outreach efforts and realized that you have to use the resources you have. You have to make do with the resources you have. And one resource for us, and which is unique, is just the fact that Swedenborg was a Swede. He was born in Stockholm, so it's even his hometown. And he's not that well known. I mean, if you go to school and so on, he's not that well known. But if you mention his name, people will say, either will say, oh yeah, I know a bit about him, or they would say, well, some might say I know a lot about him, but but most people would say, oh yeah, Swedenborg, yeah, I've heard the name. And they are, you can see that they're interested to know more about it because they know there's something special about him. So that's a real advantage for us.
I suppose if you are into literature, for example, in Sweden, or you're an academic, then you're likely to know a lot more about him. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And with those inquisitive about Swedenborg and the podcast and so on, the people we have are like professors in history, literature, things like that, or writers and theater directors and people who have some, who are sort of dealing with more literature and art and things like that. So, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, since we're getting into Nobel Prize season, that the committee that meets in Stockholm, the chair of the committee sits right behind a bust or a painting of Swedenborg himself, because Swedenborg was influential in starting the Royal Academy of Sciences, which now gives out Nobel Prizes, right?
Yeah, for the sciences, yes.
Right.
And that's happening this week. You probably noticed. And sometimes when they broadcast from that room where they announce the prize, the laureates, sometimes Swedenborg's portrait is visible on the wall there. So that's interesting.
And I would say, so there are some prominent intellectuals in Scandinavia today, at least in Sweden, who have a lot of involvement in Swedenborgian theology. I can think of Tommy Haglund, who is a composer, who is perhaps Sweden's most prominent modern composer today. He's very open about his Swedenborgian influence. We had, right in the setting where you are, I can remember because I was sitting in the audience, we had a Professor David Dunier, who is what is he? He's an astrobiologist, an expert in life on other planets and how do you detect them. And he's somebody who is very familiar with Swedenborgian thought and also has been a spokesperson for Swedenborg's thought. And all of that stuff sort of streams in through the church at one point or another. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, I mean, with David Dunier, yes, his subject was astrotheology, which is actually something that serious people are dealing with. And he was invited to NASA to talk about this because there's a lot of stuff being done in that area. So when Swedenborg wrote about Earths in the universe almost 300 years ago, most people today don't understand that the interest at that time was very high, and there were lots of people dealing with that. So Dunier has been investigating that, and as I said, there are people today who are picking up on that, but with a different kind of science than in those days. So that's one example. And he wrote his dissertation in the history of ideas on Swedenborg's, mostly his natural philosophy, but he's well versed in his theology too. And we've had him as a lecturer several times here.
I'd love to read his dissertation sometime. What would you say are some of the key theological concepts that are appealing to people in Scandinavia?
Yeah, so with our podcast series, we have probably produced 25 of them by now. And you can see how many downloads you have for each one of them. We're doing a series we call it Swedenborg's Travel in the Other World, using what Swedenborg calls memorable relations, memorabilia, in the work True Christian Religion. So we're going through those.
Those are the stories Swedenborg tells that he narrates in his books about his experiences in the next life.
Right. So it's almost like a novel. He's talking with angels and demons and so on, and discussing ideas of different kinds. Often it's pretty humorous, but it's also very deep subjects. So it's anyhow. So we actually read the text during the podcast and then talk about it, explain and so on. And those are the ones that are most popular. Then we have done a few on different Bible subjects. Adam and Eve, for instance. Adam and Eve are symbolic words for the first people on earth. They're not one man and one woman, which Swedenborg explains in a fascinating way. And so those got good traction as well. It's hard to say, but I think life after death is probably the most interesting subject.
So when you go out and you advertise an upcoming, let's say it's one of your live pods, so it's a combination of people coming into the hall and you're broadcasting it. How many people respond to those invitations in Scandinavia?
Do you mean how many people who come here?
Just what kind of response do you get? What kind of response do you get in the room from, I guess it's Greater Stockholm, but also what kind of response would you get online?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, here in this room, we always have interesting discussions afterwards. So, yeah, it's they receive it very positive way. And when people listen in, they often write to us asking about recommendations for books or have very specific questions about experience they've had, or this thing about hell, what is that, and so on. What is very encouraging is to see that people come to Sunday services, and then when you talk to them afterwards, they say, well, you know, I listened to your podcasts, and I decided to come here for a church service. And that's happened more than once, many times. So I think we're doing something right here.
Is there a kind of a profile of like, tell me a little bit about some of the people who have showed up and gotten engaged. What kind of people are they like? Well, one is they speak Swedish, right? Because this is generally all in Swedish.
Yeah, of course. But there are sometimes people coming for a holiday or something like that, or visiting friends coming from other countries, and so they sometimes show up. And even if they don't understand the service, we have conversations afterwards, and that's been inspiring for them as well. I would say all sorts of people. Lately, we had a family of 4 with grown-up children. He's an inventor. How many inventors do you know? So that was very special. And they had been looking for a church where they felt welcome and at home. They had tried different churches, and when they came to us, they said, this is it. And another couple, she's an artist, and he's actually also a bit of an inventor, but he's an engineer. Same thing. They said, well, we've been looking for something, and this is it.
What do you think it is that causes that reaction with people?
I don't really ask them up front, but you understand what they mean or how they react, or sometimes they spontaneously just open the conversation and say. A couple of things I've heard many times is it's a warm and welcoming atmosphere, and no fear or no feeling of having to sign the dotted line, but feeling totally free to talk about their beliefs and sharing their ideas, and not then being overwhelmed by us saying, well, that's not quite right, it's this way. So this openness, and I would say everybody in the congregation are very open to having new people coming, and that shows. They can feel that.
Is that something you cultivated in time, or is it just happen to be the set of people that you get to pastor with?
As you said, I've been pastor for 31 years in this congregation, and you have to work on it. You have to do things. Over the years, we've had lots of conversations, as I said before, about outreach and how do we do that. And going back to the picture of the church we had in the beginning, the inscription is in Latin, but what it means is, and this is a quote from Swedenborg, and the quote is, "Now it is permitted to enter to enter the mysteries of faith with your understanding." And the mysteries of faith means, well, your Christian belief, and that's absolutely necessary. You have to understand what you believe. You can't just blindly accept something. And I've noticed many times that it's like you speak different languages, but you mean the same thing. You come from another church background, or you've been interested in philosophy and things like that. Your terminology is different, but you mean the same thing. And so you can't just rush in and say, well, this is how to describe it. You have to think this way. And over time, you can see how their ideas, let's say, fall into place in a very, very convincing way. So no rush,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
I just have to respond because I think that there is something in that I would say is tied in with who you are as a human being today. Knowing you, and I mean, I think I met you probably, must have been close to 40 years ago when we first met. Not quite 40, but we've known each other for a very long time. And you were, at that point, attending the seminary for the Swedish State Church up in Uppsala. And I would say there's something, the sort of a summary statement about what makes you work as a theologian around entering into the mysteries of faith with one's intellect. Is that true? Do you want to comment on that?
I didn't follow you at the end. What do you mean?
I see the GöranAppelgren that I know as being a person who's somewhat driven by the desire to enter into faith's mysteries with one's intellect, to try to understand them and see, parse them apart, see how they relate with each other, see what's more important, what's deeper, what's more of an expression of those deeper things, that kind of thing.
I like that description or characterization of how my mind works, yes. And well, if you pull things apart, you have to put them together and present something to your congregation. And that's a challenge as a minister. I love doing that. Yeah. I mean, what you do as outreach efforts and what you do as a preacher, go hand in hand, of course. But yeah, we get good responses to church services too. So yeah, it's a combination of people, our congregation being open to new people, and also the message given that should be encouraging and to convey a feeling of that we are loved by the Lord. Is the bottom line for it, and then comes everything else.
With understanding, though. It's not
with
just...
understanding, absolutely. Oh yes, absolutely. And that, yeah, and I mean, that's what I see with new people coming. They realize that there is something here they haven't found in other places. It's an understanding in a setting where there is warmth and a welcoming atmosphere, and then they can grow.
Yeah, I think embedded in that is the idea of just recognizing that there is a life after death, and that life is present with us. We're in that life in a subconscious way right now, but it's the source of that love. It's the source of everything, and then I suppose truth is an articulation of that life in ways that our minds can grasp it. And I don't want to get too like esoteric on people, but I was thinking about that because it allows people the opportunity to say, oh, well, I really found something that I've been looking for my whole life. I can see it, I can understand it, I can and see this concept that is growing within me, that leads to what's next, and what's next ultimately to the next life. And it provides a quality that simply wouldn't exist if you were a person who's like, no, I think death is the end of everything and we go back to the dirt. So I think from a Swedenborgian perspective, that description of life after death and what that is like is really key in the whole theology because of the quality that it provides for the theology, which otherwise would be lacking. And it's not just an undefined quality, but he's quantitative about it. He describes it in ways that we can really wrap our minds around it, and that I think is important. Maybe that's something of what allows people just to say, oh yeah, this is what I've been looking for. I haven't found it anywhere else. But it is kind of the unique value proposition part of it for what we call the new church.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, the most popular podcasts are the ones about the spiritual world.
Right.
And like you say, there is so much. There are so many descriptions and so many environments on the other side that you can relate to when you read Swedenborg. And yeah, people who are more or less atheistic, or say life ends with death, there isn't anything more, is one category. But you have another category too, which is just regular, normal Lutherans. Because at least in Sweden, the Lutheran Church, they have almost nothing to say about life after death. There are sweeping ideas about paradise or everything's going to be fine, but no details, which means people can't picture something on the other side, and thereby using that as a mirror for who they are here. And so it's very hard to well, it's more difficult to work on your your spiritual growth if you don't have that full perspective of this life and that they are interrelated. So as soon as people come here, we have church coffee and sit down and talk and so on. Almost every time we get into this subject, and they are intrigued to hear about it. And Heaven and Hell, the Swedenborg's book Heaven and Hell, is the one we sell the most of, and and we sell a lot of them. So yes, that is really, really important and appreciated by people coming here.
So can I redirect a little bit? I mean, we're getting into the theology, which I could talk about for hours and hours, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the setup. And your podcasts are audio only, right?
Yeah.
So when they're broadcast, it's an audio thing. And I think if you go to the website that I keep putting up on the screen there, you can find links that will take you to where those podcasts are. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We have our own podcast channel, the Swedenborg Pod. So it's got its own homepage, you could say. And there you have them all listed. But you can just Google it and listen to podcasts wherever. I mean, there are different outlets for that.
Right, and you could be anywhere in the world, which I know because I listen to them. So I have I guess this is leading into the question. You didn't build all this stuff by yourself, did you? So tell us about some of the other people that are involved in it and what are their roles, and describe some of that.
Yeah, all right. So 15 years ago, the Reverend Thomas Floyd was ordained, and he works part-time, or half of his time is he works for us. He's actually Norwegian, but he's connected with our society here in Stockholm. So he comes here almost once a month. On average once a month. But of course, with online and so on, I mean, we communicate almost every day. His regular job is doing websites, being a photographer, and filming is something that he really loves. So we have reels and things like that he's done. He's also a journalist and has a good grip of language and expressing himself and so on. So lots of qualities that are just gold for us. So he's been very much involved in this, and for instance, he's the one who's done the background with Swedenborg and the portrait there. And books and brochures and so on. He's doing all the graphic work. And I think he, more than me, he's a generation younger than me. He, more than me or before me, he saw the value of podcasts. And as we know, podcasts are becoming more and more popular, and they're everywhere, and everybody's doing them.
I think the audio podcast is the fastest growing media, probably globally right now.
Yeah. It's very convenient. I mean, you can listen to them when you do the dishes or work in the garden or sit on the train and whatnot. And I think actually we are bombarded with pictures everywhere, TV and on the road and in town and everywhere. And with the podcasts, it's almost like you're going into your own room. Just listening does something to you, like reading. But you can't read when you do the dishes. So I mean, but so you leave all those images and you just have the voice. There is something special about that. So I think that's one reason why they are popular. Anyhow, so thanks to Thomas for seeing that and working hard on that. And he's the one doing the editing, and that's a big job. And he's also he's known what to look for in terms of equipment and so on. And the podcast studio we have works very, very nicely.
And you have a new person involved as well.
Yes. So and from July we have a new minister, Eric Sjödin. He was ordained by you in June here in Stockholm. A lovely occasion, and so and he's 2 generations younger than me, which is good. So eventually he's going to take over after me. Something I both look forward to, but I look forward to he being the one doing it. But anyhow, yeah. So I mentioned the reels before. We've done a couple of reels with him, and there will be more. We've done podcasts with him. During his studies, he did a study on evil spirits. So we have a podcast on evil spirits. Also one on angels. So we have a balance.
I'll have to get him on one of my shows.
Right.
Can I ask? Thomas has been an artistic driver behind the look and feel and standard in the productions that are now happening all the time coming out of the church there in Stockholm. What I'm interested in is if you have some comment on what is the difference between the church in Scandinavia and a little bit more broad, the church in Europe and the church in the United States, and how does that influence what you do, what you choose to talk about, and also what the organization looks like?
I would say, well, when you say Sweden and Europe, it's not the same thing, but you can talk about them as one thing if you compare with America. The greatest difference between the two is that America has never had a state church. From day one, there have been different churches. And my impression or my experience from America and churches is that church is something that's sort of natural in your life. It's not something strange. Oh, are you going to church? Nobody thinks that's strange. Whereas in Europe, the state church, either Catholic or Protestant or Lutheran or Calvin, whatever, state churches have been an extension of the political power, partly. And so the state church has had a very strong influence over people in a bad way. And I think that's partly why people have taken a stand against church. And hopefully it's gone so far that now people are becoming interested again. Young people have not been if I call it, damaged by bad church because their parents were not involved. And now they are free in spirit to think about what life is all about. So there is a bit of a growth in interest among young people in Europe, all over, I think.
You said you used the term bad church, and well, I think of the Inquisition, and I was thinking back. You and I were in the south of France in, what was it, May?
Yeah.
At the heart of the Inquisition, and it's amazing that so many hundreds of years later, that bad church experience that they had exterminated religion down there, and still has kind of harsh, it leaves people with a harsh taste in their mouth around what religion can be, which is a real shame. But it's amazing to think about. That's a really interesting observation about the difference between the U.S. and Europe in general. And how about specifically Sweden? Well, one is the language, but are there other things that kind of differentiate Sweden from the rest of the world with the kind of work you're doing?
That's a hard question. I mean, I'm in it, so sometimes it's difficult to watch yourself and analyze yourself. I think Swedes are, generally speaking, Swedes are a bit shy. You could call them introverts, especially if you compare with Americans, as a general rule. So again, to reach out and get people interested in religion, you have to think about that. So again, having these programs, not asking them to come to the sanctuary right away, but coming to the church hall, is a way of adapting to that shyness, and make them feel church is not dangerous. Maybe you can, have a look and so on. So yes, it does affect the way we work. Yeah.
So what about the person who's involved in listening to podcasts, and that person lives way up in the north of Sweden, hours and hours away from Stockholm? How do you offer community to that person?
That's a very interesting question, and this goes back to the COVID experience when we got to know people in different parts of Sweden. A couple of times we decided to have a church weekend here in Stockholm and have invited those people. And for some, it's been a long, expensive and long travel. So we said we'll give you a small subsidy. We'll make it a bit easier for you to join. And they have. And that's a program we will try to extend and work more on. Because the Stockholm Society is now the only new church society in Sweden. But there is interest in many places. Gothenburg is maybe sort of if we would have another congregation, it would be in Gothenburg. But there are people all over Sweden, and so this is a way of trying to connect people and make them feel looked after in a small way, at least.
So what I see happening with your outreach online throughout Scandinavia to Swedish-speaking people, wherever they happen to be in the world, it seems like, and I've heard this articulated by members of your church, where it's like, well, we sort of have two different congregations forming. We have this online thing that's developing, and we have the people who are able to come to church on Sunday. I know that there are people who are very interested in listening to this live stream who live in the UK, for example, because we have sort of a similar setup or situation in the UK. You have people that are engaged in Swedenborgian thought, and they live all over the United Kingdom. Well, you can't just get into a car and drive down from Scotland, for example, and attend church.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, tell me a little bit more about that and how this might apply as an example for future church, post-COVID church, as it were, in places like the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in England for 2 years, 30 years ago, and I visit regularly. So I'm well aware of the situation, and sometimes I'm a bit envious when I look at the UK, because most of the church people in the UK are located within a reasonable distance from each other when it comes to meeting for a weekend and things like that. Whereas in Sweden is, I mean, the surface of Sweden is much bigger, and people are spread out further than in the UK. So in a way, they have an advantage in the UK. But yeah, I think getting used to having the online community, and now and then have gatherings where you see each other in person. That combination is probably the future for many churches, and it takes time to get used to it. But I mean, more and more we are using online systems and yeah, meeting in a virtual way and so on. So we're getting used to it more and more.
Yeah, I think there's nothing like being in person with a person or a group of people, because you can read the room, you can, somebody is anxious, you see that anxiousness, you can read it in a different way than through Zoom or some other online tool. So, and you could also say, well, coming together and worshiping together in the same room is a precious gift. To be able to do that and celebrate it, you can't replicate that in the same way by having something online, which I believe in. But at the same time, there are also advantages to having an online community. And one of the ones that really stands out to me was something that your wife, Josephine, had told me, where she has a women's group that meets via Zoom, and there are women all over Europe that are meeting regularly in this group. And she was in a place where she was ill and in the hospital. And during COVID, when you couldn't come visit her in the hospital, except boom, there's her women's group, just like always, on her iPad, and they're able to be with her while she's, trying to deal with recovering from whatever she was recovering from. You never could have done that in real life anywhere, and you couldn't really do it today either. So, it's a nice expression of an intimacy that doesn't exist in the same way outside of that, which is really cool. And I'm sure there are other advantages as well. So, I had this thought. It's kind of, what does the future look like? And this is a conversation and question that a lot of pastors have been asking. I know Chuck Blair, who is the pastor of New Church Live, which is an online community exclusively, had said post-COVID church it's like we just don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what the end is like. I mean, online, yeah, we're going to be doing stuff online. But what is it going to really look like at the end of the day? I don't know if you have more thoughts about that.
Well, I have one thought, which is with podcasts, we now done something that's probably going to happen more. You mentioned Tommy Haglund before. So Thomas went down to him. He lives in the south of Sweden. He went there, and they produced this podcast. And so it's going out to people. And there was actually somebody who listened to that podcast and said, somebody we met after he had listened to the podcast, we met him here in church. And he said, it was so nice to see that you're going places to talk to people and making a podcast. So related to that is the idea of say somebody lives in the north of Sweden, and then we talked to that person and said, we could come out to you, help us organize a lecture in your town, and we'll come out to you. And that would probably generate interest, and that lonely person might get new friends, and there could be a nucleus of a few people there. And they would also be connected with the Stockholm Church, like I said before, maybe coming down now and then. So that's an idea we...
Go ahead.
No, that was all.
Yeah. I was just going to say it requires packing up the equipment and hauling it down there. But more and more you could probably. I mean, I could probably do this live stream from my phone if I wanted to. Wouldn't be quite as savvy, but still we could do it, and we could do that anywhere in the world. It does blow my mind that you and I can sit here. The big sacrifice in this is that it's late at night for you. I know the UK people who are interested in listening to this are going to listen to it after we record it and upload it. It'll be tomorrow or next week. And by the way, I think maybe we should try to get the link for that podcast with Tommy Haglund, and let's put it in the comments below once we get that uploaded so that people can see it. Would be great.
All right.
Anyway, so I find that this conversation is really important because the General Church, as a Swedenborg organization that doesn't have tons and tons of people in it, is very spread out. It's very global and very spread out. So you have, right now we have 3 ordained people working in Scandinavia, which is a huge amount of territory to cover. We have 1.25 people in the UK right now, with other people showing up now and then. Again, it's a huge territory. We have Europe, we have Australia, for example, with just our pastor. We have a connection with another version of Swedenborgian thought there. But Australia, it takes 5.5 hours to fly across Australia. It's gigantic. Or even just the Western United States or Western Canada is amazingly gigantic. So all what I see here is one of the experiments that's showing a lot of promise for the future for these areas so that we can support people in their cultures with trying to live this life of faith and celebrate this faith with each other, which is really wonderful. Well, do you have any final thoughts? We're coming up on the hour here, and I have found this just a tremendously interesting conversation. I'm glad you could hang with us so late in the evening.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to describe a bit of what we're doing up in the north. And I hope it's been useful for you who listen. And if you have any thoughts and questions and would like to continue the conversation, you're more than welcome to connect in whatever the best way is. David, you can.
Right.
Guide.
Well, you can
Right.
connect by if you write a comment on this program, we'll keep an eye on it. And also you can go to the Scandinavian or the Swedenborg Church website, which I've been putting up.
Yeah.
I think that you could get email through that, right? Or you could email us through newchurch.org and we can forward it. Any way works. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a real blessing to talk to you this evening.
Yeah, thank you, David.